Some knockouts don't come from fists, they come from silence. Muhammad Ali hadn't stepped into a ring in years. But one night, in a packed arena burning with noise and ego, a name was dragged out of the past. It wasn't an invitation. It was a dare. And that was enough. Enough to awaken a legacy that never needed to shout to be heard. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, don't forget to subscribe. A blinding spotlight hit the center of the ring as the arena roared to life. The announcer's voice thundered across the walls, introducing two names, but only one of them carried real weight. On one side, the veteran, seasoned, quiet, respected. On the other, the rising star, young, cocky, loud, famous more for his trash talk than his technique. Cameras panned the crowd, catching glimpses of influencers, retired fighters, and celebrities lined up in the VIP rows, drinks in hand, waiting for a show. The bell rang. The crowd surged. The veteran stepped forward with caution, gloves high, body tight. But the younger man didn't wait. He rushed in with the hunger of someone who had something to prove, throwing fast jabs, feints, sharp footwork. He wasn't fighting to win, he was fighting to humiliate. His punches came in flurries, dancing on the edge of recklessness, but landing just enough to back the older man toward the ropes. 30 seconds. That's all it took. A left feint. A brutal right hook. The sound cracked through the stadium like a whip. The veteran's legs gave, folding under him. He dropped hard to the canvas. The referee dove in. Medics rushed over. No movement from the downed fighter except for the slow blinking of shock and pain. The crowd exploded. Half of them leapt to their feet, cheering wildly. The other half froze, not quite sure what they had just witnessed. On the big screens above, the replay rolled, again and again, showing the knockout from different angles, as if it needed to be believed. And in the middle of the chaos, the young fighter wasn't done. He strutted around the ring, arms raised high. He leaned over his fallen opponent, and shouted something into his face. Then, without a glance at the medics still working beside him, he turned to the crowd and pulled out his phone. The flash of a selfie lit up his face. A live stream began, his voice echoing through his mic. They said he was a legend. He ain't nothing but history now. Some fans screamed louder. Others sat back uneasy. Then, the camera cut to the front row. No words. No movement. Just a man seated alone in a dark jacket, collar open, gaze steady. He didn't clap. Didn't shift in his seat. He just watched. Muhammad Ali. The screen didn't name him. No caption. No fanfare. Just a face framed by silence. The young fighter kept talking, but something in the room shifted. A ripple passed through the crowd. A subtle hush. As if everyone felt a presence without being told. Ali didn't react. He didn't smirk or frown. His expression didn't change. His eyes stayed locked on the ring. Not on the winner, but on the act. The cameras slowly panned away. The fans returned to cheering, to noise, to movement. But in that one long second, where nothing was said and no punch was thrown, everyone knew the real fight hadn't even started. Not yet. The ring lights dimmed, but the noise didn't fade. The young fighter still pulsed with adrenaline, chest rising, breath loud in the mic. He grabbed it from the announcer before they could even reset the stage. His grin stretched wide, sweat gleaming off his jaw. He turned slowly to face the crowd, feeding off their energy like fuel. "That's it!" he shouted, voice booming through the speakers. "That's the legend I was supposed to be afraid of?" Laughter rippled. He pointed to the screen showing the replay of the knockout. "Look at that, blink and you miss it. One round done." Cheers erupted from one section. Phones rose, live streams opened. He paced the ring now, not like a fighter, but a showman. Then his tone shifted. His eyes scanned the VIP rows. "You know what's funny?" he said, breathing heavy but not tired. "They always compare me to him. Always." He stopped pacing. His hand rose slowly, finger extended. Every camera followed. "There he is," he said, voice sharper now. The greatest. Muhammad Ali. The screen shifted instantly, zooming in on the silent figure seated front row. Still no reaction. Still no movement. Ali sat the same way he had from the start, shoulders relaxed, hands on his knees, eyes fixed. Not on the fighter. Not on the crowd. On the moment. The young fighter chuckled into the mic. You all keep saying I'm no Ali. Good. Because I'm not trying to be a history book. A few fans laughed. Others glanced at each other, unsure. The fighter leaned on the ropes, pointing again. You see that? He won his last title before I was even born. That was a different world. No TikTok. No real pressure. You had a few sports writers, a few cameras. You could lose and still be a hero. He shook his head. Not anymore. Today? One slip, one meme, and you're a joke. I've lived under that heat every day. And I'm still undefeated. The crowd stirred. Some shouted support. Some booed. Some just waited. The fighter stepped back to center ring. You want to talk about respect? He continued. Respect is earned right here, right now. Not in grainy highlight reels. Not in quotes from the 60s. He turned back to Ali, voice dropping low, more controlled. So here's what I'm saying, champ. You sitting there all calm, like the world still owes you silence. Prove it. Step up. Show me what makes you the greatest. Or sit there and watch the new era leave you behind. Gasps spread across the arena. Some were shocked. Others thrilled. A few looked toward Ali, waiting for a reaction that didn't come. Hashtags started trending within minutes. Hashtag Ali too old. Hashtag fight the greatest. Hashtag real versus legend. Sports pundits tweeted in real time. Commentators scrambled to find words. The air turned heavy. Not just with sound, but with anticipation. The crowd wasn't cheering for the winner anymore. They were cheering for what came next. The drama. The confrontation. The fall of a giant. The fighter raised his arms again. This is my world now, he roared. You either fight or fade. The arena lit up with noise, but at the center of it all, Ali didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't even flinch. His presence was louder than the shouts. The young fighter, between the roar and the flashing lights, stole one more glance at him. And for the briefest moment, his expression faltered. Just a flicker. Just enough to show that maybe, just maybe, the silence unnerved him more than any insult could. And in that second, the crowd began to shift. A few claps faded. Some laughter thinned. Not enough to stop the momentum, but enough to plant a question. Maybe the real power wasn't in the mic. Maybe it was in the man who never needed one. The arena didn't move. For the first time all night, the noise didn't rise. It dropped. It fell into something still and electric. The young fighter stood in the ring, chest puffed, eyes scanning the crowd, waiting for one final laugh to land. But no one laughed. Because in the front row, under a silent, unplanned spotlight, Muhammad Ali was standing. No music played. No announcement echoed. No camera angle was dramatic enough to capture what was happening. It was quiet. Just the sound of fabric shifting as Ali slowly pulled off his jacket, folding it once with care. He handed it to the man sitting beside him, a longtime friend, a silent witness. Then came the ring. A simple band of gold, slipped off and placed into a waiting hand. Then the watch. Then nothing. Ali took one slow step forward. The audience leaned in like a single body. Phones lifted. No one said a word. Even the commentators went quiet, their voices caught behind their breath. It wasn't a walk. It wasn't a march. It was something in between, a movement too measured to be casual, too calm to be dramatic. Every step was deliberate. Like each one held a memory. Like the floor still remembered who he was. The young fighter blinked hard, trying to hold on to the smirk that had carried him this far. But it wavered. Just a little. Just enough. His fingers curled tighter around the mic. He called out, There he is! The ghost of boxing past. But his voice cracked halfway through, swallowed by the silence that met it. No boos. No cheers. Just breath. The crowd was holding it. Ali reached the steps. A single crew member moved to open the ropes, but he didn't wait. He stepped over the second rope with a grace that seemed to defy his age. Not rushed. Not slow. Just right. His shoes touched the canvas with the weight of 1,000 fights behind them. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't look at the cameras. He didn't look at the crowd. His eyes found one person only. The fighter. They stood across from each other now. Decades apart. Styles apart. Worlds apart. But only one of them looked like he had nothing to prove. From the seats, a single voice shouted, "Ali!" Then another. Then another. Not loud. Not wild. Almost apologetic. As if they were trying to take something back. As if they had just remembered who they were watching. The young fighter shifted. His shoulders rolled. He forced a bounce in his stance. Tried to shake off the feeling. But it didn't leave. Ali hadn't said a word. But his presence filled the cage more completely than the lights or the cameras ever could. For one long second, nothing moved. And that was the twist. No music. No mic. No bravado. Just a man. Still. Watching. And in that stillness, the entire room began to understand. This wasn't going to be a fight. This was going to be a lesson. The air inside the arena felt thinner now. Not because of heat or movement, but because of what wasn't happening. No music. No mic static. No roar of the crowd. Just the steady hum of lights overhead, and the sound of breathing from two men sharing the same ring. One of them was pacing. The young fighter. He bounced on his heels, rolled his shoulders, threw shadow punches toward invisible enemies. His lips moved constantly, spitting out lines meant to cut. "Still got time to sit down, old man," he said, grinning as he flexed. "Save yourself the embarrassment." No reaction. Ali stood near his corner, slow and precise, adjusting his gloves. No eye contact. No head shake. Just the quiet rhythm of preparation. The young fighter smirked again, louder this time. "You hear that, champ? That's silence." No one's scared of ghosts anymore. The crowd didn't cheer. Not like before. The energy had changed. What once fed him now felt like empty noise. A few claps scattered. Mostly eyes. Watching. Waiting. One of the commentators leaned into his mic, voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't a show," he said. "It's a statement." The camera cut to Ali again. He reached up, adjusting his headgear with calm fingers. His face didn't twitch. His breath didn't change. His body moved like it had done this 1,000 times, and it had. There was no warm-up. No ritual. No hype. Just readiness. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. The young fighter circled closer, trying to find something in Ali's face to latch onto. A twitch. A blink. Anything. "That's all you got?" he taunted. "Silence? You've been quiet for too long. People forgot what you used to be." Ali's hands dropped slowly to his sides. His body squared, grounded still. But his eyes never moved. They locked onto the younger man, steady as stone. The kind of look that didn't shake under pressure. Pressure shook under it. The crowd started to shift again. Not loud. Not fast. Just enough. People who once shouted the young fighter's name now stared without sound. The cheers faded into quiet attention. Like they were waiting for something bigger than a punch. And that's when it hit. The fighter wasn't just losing control of the crowd. He was losing the stage. Losing the moment. The ring no longer felt like his. Every word he threw out hit a wall. Every move he made looked smaller next to stillness. He stepped forward again, trying to hold the momentum. Tried to roar. To flex. To fill the space. But nothing stuck. Ali didn't need to speak. He was speaking anyway. Not with volume. With presence. And that presence was louder than everything else. The bell hadn't rung yet. No fist had flown. But something had already broken. Not bones. Not skin. Something deeper. The illusion. The control. The spotlight. It had shifted. Without a word, without a move, Muhammad Ali had done what no one else had managed all night. He took it back. The bell rang and the young fighter exploded forward like a spring released. His fist snapped through the air, precise and furious, a storm of motion built from hours of training and ego sharpened by the roar of 1,000 screens. The sound of his gloves slicing the air echoed louder than the crowd. He wanted to overwhelm, to dominate, to erase the silence with violence. Ali didn't flinch. He didn't raise his hands high in panic or retreat to the ropes. He moved. Just enough. A slide to the left. A pivot to the right. A half step back. His gloves stayed close, loose, quiet. The younger man kept charging, chasing a target that never stood still. One punch, two, a third, all missed by inches. The crowd leaned forward, unsure if they were watching defense or delay. But those who knew, those who'd seen it before, saw the rhythm. The science behind the dance. Ali wasn't dodging. He was measuring. For 30 seconds, the young fighter threw everything he had. Fast jabs. Hooks. Low body shots. But nothing landed clean. Nothing rattled. Every punch missed by just enough to sting the ego more than the flesh. Ali's feet moved like they were floating. His shoulders dipped and rolled with the grace of something rehearsed not in weeks, but decades. And through it all, his face didn't change. Calm. Focused. Absolute. The younger man's breath grew louder. The crispness of his combos began to fray. His footwork lost half a beat. His eyes darted for reaction. For damage. For any sign he was getting through. But Ali gave him nothing. Then it changed. Not fast. Not loud. But with intent. Ali stepped forward. Just once. The shift was subtle, but the air changed. The young fighter swung again, wild, reaching, and missed. In the space left open, Ali countered. One jab. Fast. Sharp. Not meant to hurt. Meant to mark. It landed clean on the cheek. A snap of leather on skin. The crowd gasped. The young fighter blinked, confused. Then another jab. Same speed. Same place. And again. 3 quick shots, identical, surgical. Suddenly he wasn't the aggressor anymore. He was reacting. He stepped back. Ali followed. Not rushing. Not chasing. Closing. His fists came in short bursts, not combos, not flurries, but cuts. Like a scalpel. A slice here. A sting there. The body. The chin. The ribs. Every strike controlled, every movement effortless. The young fighter threw a looping right hook. Ali ducked beneath it. Countered with a jab to the ribs. The sound thudded through the ring. The young man stumbled back, breath catching. He looked at Ali with something new in his eyes. Not arrogance. Not anger. Doubt. He circled, shaking his head, trying to clear it. He tried to speak, to taunt, to smile, but the words caught behind his teeth. Ali didn't say a word. He stepped in again. Jab. Jab. Uppercut, not full power, just enough to lift the chin. The fighter staggered. His balance faltered. The crowd began to feel it now. The turn. The storm had passed, and now came the control. Ali didn't roar. He didn't flex. He didn't raise his arms. He just moved. Like water finding cracks in a dam. The younger man tried again. A desperate charge. He swung left, right, overhand. But Ali wasn't there. He was never there. He was a step ahead, a second faster, a breath calmer. And the crowd saw it. They didn't cheer yet. They didn't chant. They watched. Quietly. Like they were learning something. The young fighter's legs slowed. His gloves dropped just slightly. Sweat streamed down his face. His breath came in short bursts now. Panic edged into his eyes. He hadn't been hit hard. He hadn't been rocked. But he had been denied. Denied contact. Denied dominance. Denied control. And that was worse. Ali stepped in one last time. No wind-up. No set-up. A clean left hook. The same kind that had finished men decades earlier. Sharp. Fast. Final. It connected flush. The young fighter's head snapped sideways. His knees buckled. For a moment he stayed upright, swaying like a man standing on broken ice. Then his body gave. He dropped. Not violently. Not with drama. Just folded. The kind of fall that says everything's over. The crowd didn't erupt. Not yet. There was too much weight in the silence. Too much clarity. The referee started toward the center, but stopped. There was no need. The fight was done. The lesson delivered. Ali didn't raise his hands. He didn't celebrate. He stood still, gaze soft, expression unreadable. The young man lay still on the mat, blinking, chest rising and falling. Drenched in sweat. Drenched in something heavier. Reality. The crowd slowly stood. Not screaming. Not chanting. Applauding. Like they had just watched something sacred. Not a fight. A reminder. Ali turned away. No fist pump. No glare. No message to the cameras. He didn't need to prove anything. He had done it all without raising his voice. Without breaking form. Without feeding the noise. The final twist wasn't the knockout. It was the realization. The young fighter hadn't lost because he got hit hard. He lost because he never touched the man who stood before him. He lost not to a punch, but to presence. Ali didn't win with brutality. He won with mastery. And the ring, once filled with chaos, now pulsed with something deeper. Respect. The arena didn't roar. It breathed. The kind of breath that comes after something bigger than spectacle. The crowd stood not in frenzy, but in reflection. No chants. No screams. Just a quiet wave of claps rolling through the seats like rainfall over rooftops. Slow. Measured. Honest. In the center of the ring, the young fighter lay on his back, blinking against the bright overhead lights. His chest rose and fell with uneven rhythm, sweat painting his face in defeat. Not the kind that comes from pain, but from the weight of something he couldn't touch. Medics were already by his side, speaking low, flashing lights in his eyes. He nodded faintly, trying to sit up. His muscles obeyed barely. He pushed himself onto his elbows, then to a seated position, legs sprawled. Still breathing heavy, but breathing. He looked around. The lights still burned down on him, but the crowd's gaze wasn't with him anymore. They weren't watching his pain. They were watching someone else. Across the ring, Muhammad Ali didn't raise his arms. He didn't climb the ropes. He simply turned. Calm. Quiet. Still inside the ring, but already larger than it. The cameras didn't rush to him. They followed, but from a distance. No interviewers approached. No handlers. He didn't look for a mic. He didn't need one. The young fighter turned his head and saw him, walking toward the ropes, still composed. And for a second, their eyes met. Not long. Not sharp. But enough. Enough for the younger man to feel something that hadn't hit him until now. The crowd wasn't chanting his name anymore. They were murmuring something else. Not frenzied. Not loud. Reverent. Ali. 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 A slow rhythm. Like a prayer. He had heard that name before. Of course he had. He had used it, mocked it, turned it into a punchline. But hearing it now, soft, steady, rising from thousands of people who weren't cheering a win, but honoring a presence, was different. It cut deeper than any hook. Ali reached the edge of the ring. Instead of stepping out, he paused. He looked back. Not to the crowd. To the fighter still on the floor. And without a word, he reached into his corner, pulled a small white towel, and walked back to where the young man sat. He crouched, slowly, knees folding with time and grace, and placed the towel gently on the mat, just inches from the fighter's foot. Not thrown in surrender. Not tossed in mockery. Placed. Deliberate. Then he stood, turned, and stepped out of the ring. The young fighter looked down at the towel. His breath caught. No one explained it. No one needed to. It wasn't about defeat. It was about forgiveness. The kind that doesn't ask for attention. The kind that simply offers a path back. Around the ring, the audience stood quietly. Some with hands together. Some with heads low. The same crowd that had cheered ego minutes ago now applauded humility. And it wasn't for show. It was because they saw something rare. Real. The young fighter looked up again. He could still hear the name echoing softly. Ali. Not shouted. Whispered. Like a reminder. Like a lesson. He bowed his head. Not in shame. In understanding. Ali didn't wait for praise. He never did. He walked down the aisle as calmly as he had entered, jacket over one arm, no camera in his face. Just space opening before him. As if the world knew to move aside. As if it had remembered who he was. And behind him, on the mat, a young man sat still. Less wounded than awakened. The arena was nearly empty now. The lights dimmed to soft pools across vacant seats. Confetti lay untouched on the floor, curling at the edges, quiet reminders of a show that ended without music. A few workers moved in silence, collecting bottles, folding chairs, wiping down rails no longer gripped by excitement. One of them paused. A young man. Hoodie half-zipped. Wristband from the crowd still on his arm. Earlier, he had been on his feet, yelling louder than anyone else. Chanting the young fighter's name. Laughing at the taunts. Feeding the flame. Now, he sat alone in the shadows of the lower rows, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the far end of the tunnel. Watching the last figure disappear into it. Ali. No fanfare. No press. Just that walk. Still. Straight. Like nothing more needed to be said. The young man exhaled through his nose, like someone just waking up from a long noise-filled dream. He picked at the corner of his wristband, slowly pulling it off. Then said quietly, to no one at all, "Now I get it." He paused. The echo of his voice barely reached the floor. "That's why they call him a legend." No one answered. No one needed to. The moment had already spoken. Around him, silence stretched. Not empty. Full. Full of meaning. Of lessons delivered without volume. Of presence that didn't demand permission. He stood slowly, brushing off his pants, taking one last look at the ring. It sat untouched now. Just 4 ropes, a square of canvas, and a towel still folded in the corner. He didn't take a photo. Didn't post a story. Just turned and walked out. The echo of his steps barely louder than the whisper still circling the walls. Ali. You don't need to shout to change the world. You just need to be silent at the right time. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.